There comes a moment when the soul whispers, "Enough." Not in anger, not in fear, but in sacred exhaustion. You reach a place where the tears have dried, where explanations have run out, and where silence becomes the only language left that still feels holy. That moment, quiet and invisible to everyone else, is when your story begins to change. Picture a late evening. The room is dim, lit only by a single lamp. You're sitting there, staring at nothing in particular. The air feels heavy, not from sadness, but from realization. The kind of realization that doesn't shout, but softly says, "This is the last time. The last time you apologize for things that weren't your fault. The last time you beg to be understood by someone who never intended to understand. The last time you mistake manipulation for love." Before we begin this journey, it is a blessing to know from which part of the world you are watching and at what hour of the day God has guided you to this message. Truly, it is a joy to witness how the Lord gathers hearts from every corner of the earth, uniting them in one spirit and in one truth. In that stillness, something sacred happens. The heart, once trembling from constant confusion, begins to find rhythm again. Your breath becomes prayer. Each inhale says, "I release." Each exhale says, "I am free." You may not see it yet, but heaven is already rewriting your future. The narcissist will never recognize this moment for what it is. To them, it's just another silence, another round they believe they've won. They don't understand that your silence this time isn't submission, it's deliverance. While they're busy celebrating your absence, the Spirit of the Lord is teaching you presence. You're learning to exist again, not as a reaction to their chaos, but as a reflection of divine peace. The Bible says in Isaiah chapter 26 verse 3, "You will keep in perfect peace those whose minds are steadfast, because they trust in you." That peace is not weakness, it's armor. It's what protects you from going back to the fire that once burned you. As days pass, you start noticing small miracles. The morning light feels softer. The coffee tastes richer. The sound of birds outside your window, you hadn't heard them in so long. It's as if creation itself is welcoming you back. The same world that once felt gray now has color again. And in that color, you realize the truth. The narcissist never truly had power over you. They only had access, and even that, heaven has now revoked. You begin to walk differently, not faster, but freer. Your heart still remembers, but it no longer trembles. You stop rehearsing conversations in your head. You stop waiting for closure that will never come. Instead, you start talking to God in whispers of gratitude. "Thank you," you say quietly, not for the pain, but for the revelation it brought. Because now you see it. Everything the narcissist tried to destroy in you was the very thing they lacked: your kindness, your patience, your capacity to love deeply. These were never weaknesses. They were evidence of divine strength. And as you stand in that truth, you realize something deeper. You were never meant to stay in that storm forever. It was only the passage that led you to peace. Tonight, as you rest, let that peace settle into you. Don't chase answers. Don't relive old memories. Just breathe. The chapter has turned. What's coming next is no longer about them. It's about your healing, your clarity, and your new beginning under the gentle light of grace. There is a strange silence that follows the end of a spiritual battle. It doesn't sound peaceful at first. It feels like walking through the ruins after a long storm. the quiet hum of what's left behind. You look around your life and realize that the noise is gone. No more constant defending. No more trying to predict moods or guard every word. But with that silence comes a question that lingers in the air. Who am I now that the chaos has stopped? The house feels different. The air seems lighter, but also unfamiliar. You begin to notice the small spaces that were once filled with their voice. The kitchen table, the corner of the living room, even your phone screen. Their absence feels like a ghost that hovers, not because you miss them, but because they had taken up so much space inside you. And now, for the first time in a long time, there's room to breathe. One evening, you find yourself sitting outside, watching the sky fade from gold to violet. The air smells like rain on dust. For a moment, you remember how they used to twist every act of kindness into control, every apology into power. You remember the confusion, the way you kept hoping they would see your heart. But as the wind brushes against your face, something inside you whispers, you don't live there anymore. The past has lost its grip. The Bible says in 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 17, "Therefore, if anyone is in Christ, the new creation has come, the old has gone, the new is here." You are not rebuilding what was destroyed. You are becoming something new. And newness requires quiet, time for the roots of your peace to grow deep before the world notices the bloom. Healing doesn't look grand at first. It looks like simple obedience, choosing not to text them back, choosing to stay home instead of explaining yourself, choosing prayer instead of panic. It's in these quiet choices that heaven celebrates. Every time you choose peace, the kingdom records it as victory. In the stillness, you begin to hear thoughts that once were drowned out by noise. Thoughts like, maybe I'm not broken, or maybe love isn't meant to hurt. These are not just thoughts. They are revelations. God's voice often speaks in whispers because he wants only those who are truly listening to hear. One morning, you catch your reflection in the mirror. The eyes looking back are calmer. There's no more rush to prove anything, no more hunger for validation. You smile, not because everything is perfect, but because you finally feel safe inside your own presence. That is holy ground. You are no longer walking through life on eggshells. You are walking on promises. And somewhere in that peace, the narcissist begins to notice your distance. They send messages, little tests to see if they still have power. But your response is silence. Not out of pride, but wisdom. You have learned that answering is participation, and peace has nothing to prove. Your quietness is no longer weakness. It is discernment wrapped in grace. You may still dream about them. You may wake up some mornings feeling the weight of memories. That's normal. Healing isn't forgetting, it's remembering differently. You look at the past and see lessons instead of losses. You see a teacher instead of a tormentor. You begin to thank God not for what happened, but for what it revealed about who you truly are. And so, this is your beginning. Not a loud one, not a dramatic one, but a sacred one, a dawn rising over ashes, a heart learning to trust again, a spirit no longer chained to the approval of the ungrateful. This is where heaven starts to rebuild you, not as who you were before them, but as who you were always meant to be. There comes a moment, often late at night, when your heart finally admits the truth, not just about what they did, but about what it cost you. The cost wasn't only your peace or your time. It was your sense of safety. You lived in a constant state of emotional alert, always preparing for the next shift in their mood. You learned how to predict storms before they came, how to soften your voice, how to apologize for things you didn't do, just to keep the peace that never stayed. And now that you're free, that hyper-alertness doesn't leave overnight. Even in silence, your spirit still flinches at sudden sounds or sharp tones. But healing begins when you realize you are not living in that battlefield anymore. That was their world, not yours. You survived it, and that means you are stronger than the key manipulation that tried to define you. Picture this. It's early morning. The world outside is quiet. You stand by your window, holding a warm cup of tea. The light falls across your hands, soft and golden. For the first time in years, you feel something rise in you that isn't fear, it's gratitude. Gratitude for the escape, for the lessons, for the chance to breathe again. That simple moment, that small sigh of relief, is holy. It's heaven reminding you that survival was not the end of your story. It was the beginning of redemption. In Psalm chapter 34, verse 18, it says, "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit." You may have been broken, but you are not abandoned. God was watching every tear that fell in secret. Every night you prayed for clarity that never came. And now, the same silence that once scared you is where His presence lives. Healing from a narcissist often feels like detoxing from a drug. You crave what once hurt you because pain was disguised as love for so long. You miss the rhythm of the chaos, the way their words filled the space, even if those words were cruel. That's not weakness. That's withdrawal. Your brain was trained to find comfort in confusion. But slowly, as you sit with the quiet, your soul learns a new language, peace. And peace will not raise its voice to compete with the past. There's a story told about a clay pot that cracked and leaked water along the path. The owner almost threw it away, thinking it was useless. But one day he noticed flowers growing along the side of the road where the pot had leaked. The brokenness had watered beauty all along. That is you. What leaked from your pain is now feeding your purpose. The narcissist may still walk around believing they won. But the truth is, they lost the only thing that made them feel powerful, your attention. Without your light, their world dims. Without your compassion, their manipulation loses its color. They'll try to replace you, but deep down, they know. They'll never find another soul like yours. You loved deeply, and even if they couldn't receive it, heaven did. Love never disappears. It just returns to its source. Now, take a moment. Place your hand over your heart. Feel it beating? That rhythm is proof of life, of divine endurance. You are still here, still breathing, still capable of joy. You are walking proof that the human spirit, when anchored in truth, cannot be destroyed, only transformed. And as you walk into this next chapter, remember, peace is not something you chase. It's something you protect. Every time you choose not to look back, you choose resurrection over ruin. Every time you rest in silence instead of seeking closure, you invite heaven to speak louder than your pain. Something sacred is awakening, and it's only just beginning. There's a strange quiet after the storm ends. When the shouting stops, when the door finally closes behind them, and when their absence settles into the walls of your home, you begin to hear the sounds you once ignored. The hum of the refrigerator, the chirping of crickets, the distant ticking of the clock. And then something else, your own heartbeat. That steady rhythm you once silenced to survive. It is in that quiet that healing begins. At first, it feels empty, like you've lost everything familiar. Even their cruelty had a pattern, and now that pattern is gone. But slowly, the quiet becomes sacred. The stillness that used to frighten you starts to feel like a soft blanket over your shoulders. You begin to breathe again, deeply, without fear that someone will accuse you of being dramatic for simply existing. Picture this moment. You're standing by your kitchen sink, washing dishes in warm water. Sunlight falls across the window, catching little dust particles that float like tiny stars. It's so ordinary, yet so holy. Because this is what peace feels like. It's not loud or flashy. It's gentle, patient, and faithful. You realize that the most beautiful miracles are often the quiet ones, the ones that rebuild your soul one heartbeat at a time. In Isaiah chapter 26 verse 3 it says, "You will keep in perfect peace those whose minds are steadfast, because they trust in you." Peace doesn't mean the pain never existed. It means you no longer let it control your future. It's the realization that you don't need their apology to heal. You don't need their recognition to be whole. You don't even need them to see your worth, because heaven already saw it long before they ever did. The narcissist once played with your emotions like strings on an instrument, creating confusion and guilt. They taught you to question your memory, your motives, even your goodness. They made you think that love was something to be earned through suffering. But the truth is, love is not a performance. It doesn't beg to be believed. Real love is steady. It doesn't vanish when it's inconvenient or fade when you make a mistake. When you start to understand that truth, you begin to reclaim your power. Each small act of self-compassion, eating a meal slowly, walking outside, forgiving yourself for staying too long, becomes an act of worship. You are no longer reacting to their chaos. You are responding to grace. And then there's forgiveness, not the kind that excuses what happened, but the kind that frees your soul. Forgiveness is not a door you open for them. It's a window you open for light to enter you. It means you refuse to let bitterness shape your story. It means you choose to let heaven rewrite what they tried to erase. You may think forgiveness is too much to ask right now. That's okay. Healing is not a straight line. Some days you'll feel strong. Other days you'll feel like collapsing. But even in your weakness, you are growing. Even when you cry, heaven counts your tears as prayers. Psalm chapter 56 verse 8 reminds us, "You keep track of all my sorrows. You have collected all my tears in your bottle. You have recorded each one in your book." Every tear mattered. Every prayer was heard. And now, with each breath, you are stepping into a new kind of strength, the quiet kind. The kind that doesn't need to prove anything. The kind that stands tall, not because it's proud, but because it's finally free. You've walked through the fire and did not burn. You've crossed the river and did not drown. You are now walking toward sunrise. And the light ahead is not temporary, it's eternal, because once peace finds a home in your soul, it never leaves. It simply grows. There comes a point when you stop asking why they did it. The questions used to circle your mind endlessly. Why did they lie? Why did they pretend to care? How could someone claim love yet destroy it piece by piece? But one morning you wake up and realize the answers don't matter anymore, because understanding their darkness will never bring your light back. The only way forward is to stop dissecting the pain and start reclaiming the power it tried to take. Imagine sitting at a park bench in late afternoon. The air smells like rain. You watch the sky turn gold as children laugh in the distance. You realize something profound. Life is still happening. It didn't stop when they left. The world didn't collapse when they withdrew their affection. It simply shifted, waiting for you to notice that beauty was still present, even in your healing. That realization is divine. Because now you begin to see what the narcissist never could, that your heart wasn't weak, it was deep. It loved with sincerity, with patience, with hope. You gave chances they didn't deserve because your love was genuine. But they mistook your kindness for weakness. They saw your empathy as a tool to control. What they never understood is that empathy is not fragility. It's sacred strength. Romans chapter 8 verse 28 says, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love Him." Even betrayal can become a teacher. Even heartbreak can shape humility. Because while the narcissist was building illusions, heaven was building endurance within you. They believed that by leaving, they took something valuable. But in truth, they only revealed what was eternal, your capacity to rise. They underestimated the quiet resilience that lives inside a faithful soul. You see, when you've been through enough storms, you stop fearing the rain. When you've walked through enough shadows, you stop mistaking darkness for defeat. There's something sacred that happens when your pain meets purpose. One night, as you lay awake thinking of all you lost, you whisper a simple prayer, "Help me see the reason." And somehow the silence answers. Not in thunder, not in visions, but in peace. You start to see that maybe all this time, heaven wasn't trying to punish you. It was preparing you. You were being trained to discern, to recognize false love, to value truth over attention. What you thought was rejection was actually redirection. Because had you stayed, your spirit would have withered. The narcissist didn't just want your loyalty, they wanted your light. They needed it to reflect themselves, to appear whole while you grew smaller. But once you stopped feeding their emptiness, they had nothing left to mirror. And so they will move on, searching for new attention, new supply. They will try to repeat the same pattern, because that's all they know. But you are no longer part of their circle. You've graduated from their manipulation school. You've seen behind the curtain, and there is no magic there. Only mirrors and masks. The day you stop trying to make them understand is the day you reclaim your peace. You don't owe them closure. You don't owe them a final conversation. The closure comes when you realize you never needed their validation. You only needed truth. That truth is that love is still real. It wasn't destroyed, only redirected. It now flows differently, not toward them, but back toward the source of all comfort. 2 Corinthians chapter 1 verse 4 says, "He comforts us in all our troubles, so that we can comfort those in any trouble." One day, your story will comfort another soul walking through the same valley. Because pain that is surrendered becomes ministry, and heartbreak that is healed becomes wisdom. And now your heart, once crushed, beats again with new purpose. You're not just surviving anymore. You're becoming who you were always meant to be, It's a strange moment. That first day you no longer feel the urge to check their messages, their social media, their life. For so long, your attention was their fuel. Every time they posted, you wondered if it was about you. Every silence felt like punishment. But one day, the addiction breaks. The chain snaps quietly. You look at your phone, and for the first time, you don't care what they're doing. Because your peace finally matters more than their chaos. That moment is called freedom. And it's holy. But freedom doesn't come easily. It's not something that happens all at once. It's a process, a sacred detox of the soul. The narcissist taught you to crave emotional drama, to live in cycles of hope and heartbreak. They made you believe that love meant intensity, not stability. But slowly, God begins to rewrite that belief. John chapter 8 verse 36 says, "If the Son therefore shall make you free, ye shall be free indeed." That verse isn't just about spiritual salvation, it's about every kind of bondage, including the invisible chains of emotional abuse. When truth enters your heart, lies begin to lose their power. You start noticing small changes in yourself. You sleep better. You laugh without guilt. You stop replaying every conversation in your head, trying to figure out what you could have done differently. You understand now, the problem was never your worth. It was their wound. Narcissists are broken mirrors. They reflect fragments, not faces. They cannot love because they have never faced themselves truthfully, and you, beloved soul, were never meant to live in fragments. You were made for wholeness. Healing, however, can feel lonely at first. You miss the chaos. Not because it was good, but because it was familiar. You'll catch yourself thinking, maybe they weren't that bad. That's not weakness. That's withdrawal. Emotional addiction speaks in nostalgia. It tries to convince you to return to what almost destroyed you. But every time you resist, your spirit grows stronger. In those quiet evenings when loneliness whispers, remember this: solitude is not punishment, it is purification. You are being cleansed of every false version of love you accepted. The emptiness you feel is not absence, it's space being made for something sacred. God often empties before he fills. Think of the story in Isaiah chapter 43 verse 19. Behold, I will do a new thing. Now it shall spring forth. Shall the not know it? This is that new thing. You may not see it yet, but it's already happening within you. The seeds of peace are sprouting where pain once lived. And yes, the narcissist may still try to return. They will test your boundaries with charm, with memories, with sudden guilt trips. They might say, "No one will love you like I did." And that's true, because what they gave wasn't love. It was control disguised as affection. Real love doesn't confuse, manipulate, or drain. Real love nourishes. Every time you choose silence over response, you're breaking their power. Every time you forgive without reopening the door, you're stepping deeper into peace. You no longer fight for closure because you understand some chapters must end unfinished. Not because they lack answers, but because they were never meant to define your story. Soon, the memories stop hurting. They become lessons. You start to thank heaven, not for the pain, but for the wisdom it produced. You no longer hate them. You see them for what they are. Unhealed souls, still searching for mirrors instead of mercy. And as you walk away from their shadow, the air feels lighter. The colors of the world grow brighter. That's what truth does. It brings color back to a life once drained by deception. Your heart whispers, "I made it through." But heaven replies, "You didn't just make it through. You were transformed." Because freedom isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning of a new one. And in the next chapter, something beautiful begins to unfold, something you never thought you'd feel again. Peace without pain. There comes a time when silence itself becomes your loudest victory. You no longer need to defend yourself, explain your worth, or prove your intentions. The need to be understood fades away, replaced by something far stronger, peace that cannot be shaken. At first, that silence feels strange. You used to be the one who always responded, always tried to fix, always sought closure. But now, the quiet doesn't hurt. It heals. You start realizing that not every question deserves an answer, and not every attack deserves a reaction. The narcissist thrived on your words. Every message, every emotional reply was fuel for their ego. But once the supply is cut off, their illusion begins to crumble. It's not revenge. It's release. The narcissist can't stand silence. To them, silence is rejection. It tells them they no longer have control, no longer occupy space in your mind. They'll try everything to break it. False apologies, subtle flattery, guilt-ridden confessions. They'll even pretend they've changed. But you'll know better this time, because you've changed. There's a peace that comes only after chaos, a peace born not from comfort, but from clarity. You begin to understand that some people aren't meant to hear from you again, not because you hate them, but because you love yourself now. You value your spirit too much to keep returning to what broke it. Proverbs chapter 17 verse 28 says, "Even a fool, when he holds his peace, is counted wise." Silence in this season is wisdom. It's your declaration that you are no longer bound by their narrative. And in that silence, something divine happens. You start hearing your own thoughts again, not the ones shaped by manipulation, but the ones born from truth. You hear your own laughter, pure and unforced. You hear your prayers again, not begging for change, but giving thanks for deliverance. There's a soft evening light that enters your home now. Maybe you sit by the window with a cup of tea, and the quiet feels almost sacred. You notice small things, the sound of rain, the hum of the refrigerator, the soft glow of the lamp. They're ordinary moments, but to your healed heart, they feel extraordinary, because peace used to feel foreign. Now it feels like home. The narcissist, meanwhile, begins to unravel. The silence drives them inward, into the empty places they've always avoided. Without your reactions, they face themselves, something they were never prepared to do. And though they might try to find new sources of validation, nothing quite fills the void you once filled. They realize too late that control isn't love, and power isn't connection, but you've already walked away. You no longer need to see their downfall to feel satisfied. Your healing is its own victory. You're not watching for karma, you're busy living again. The narcissist's chaos becomes a distant echo, fading behind you as you move toward peace. And here's what's remarkable. You start to forgive, not for their sake, but for yours. Forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. It means freedom. You stop carrying the weight of resentment because it no longer serves you. You understand now that forgiveness is not about approving their behavior. It's about refusing to let it define your heart, your prayers change too. They become softer, simpler. You whisper, "Lord, thank you for removing what was never meant for me." And peace settles like a gentle breeze across your spirit. In time, you realize that your silence wasn't weakness. It was your final word, a sacred statement of strength. You didn't need revenge, you needed recovery. And you got it. Because when you stop engaging with the narcissist, you stop being a character in their story. You become the author of your own. And as this chapter closes, a new question arises, not about them, but about you. What kind of life will you build now that peace has returned? When peace begins to settle, the silence around you starts to feel like sacred ground. You walk differently now. The same streets, the same house, the same familiar spaces, but everything feels lighter, as if the air itself has been cleansed. What once carried tension now carries calm. What once echoed with pain now whispers hope. You wake up earlier these days. The sunlight finds you through the curtains, soft and golden. You sit quietly, maybe with a cup of warm tea in your hands, and realize something powerful. You are no longer waiting for an apology that will never come. You have made peace with the truth. The narcissist's absence is no longer a wound. It is space, open, clean, and holy. Into that space, something new begins to grow. There was a time when your mind was a battlefield. Every thought a struggle between who you were and what they told you to be. But slowly, the war ends. You hear a different voice now, gentle, steady, eternal. It reminds you that your worth was never dependent on how someone treated you. It was decided long ago, before the pain, before the betrayal, before the breaking. Ephesians chapter 2, verse 10 says, "For we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works." You are not broken beyond repair. You are being restored, piece by piece. Day by day, you begin to notice your reflection again, not as someone who barely survived, but as someone who is learning to thrive. The sparkle in your eyes returns. The heaviness around your heart begins to lift. You laugh a little more easily, breathe a little more deeply. Healing, you discover, is not loud. It's quiet and sacred, often unseen. It's the small decisions, choosing rest over worry, prayer over panic, gratitude over grief. It's forgiving yourself for not leaving sooner. It's realizing you did the best you could with the light you had at the time. You start rebuilding, not as a desperate attempt to fill a void, but as an act of worship. You cook meals that nourish you. You tidy the spaces that once held chaos. You plant flowers and watch them grow. You listen to songs that once made you cry, and this time they make you smile. The narcissist fades further into memory. Their voice, once thunderous in your mind, grows faint until it disappears completely. You no longer replay their words. You no longer seek meaning in their silence. You've learned that some endings are not tragedies, they are redirections. And in the quiet moments, when doubt tries to creep back in, you remember the verse from Isaiah chapter 43, verse 18. Forget the former things. Do not dwell on the past. See, I am doing a new thing. Those words feel alive now. They pulse through your veins like light. A new thing, yes. That's what this season is. Not a recovery of what was lost, but a rebirth of what was meant to be. You begin to dream again, not of revenge, not of being understood, but of peace, purpose, and presence. You imagine walking into a new chapter where you are not shrinking to fit someone's shadow, but standing fully in your own light, and though your steps may still tremble at times, you keep walking. Because you've learned that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's the decision to move forward anyway. You glance toward the horizon, where morning meets sky, and whisper a prayer. Thank you for teaching me that endings are not always losses. In that moment, peace fills every corner of your heart. You've made it through the storm. You've survived the breaking. And though the world may not see the full journey, heaven witnessed every tear, every prayer, every quiet moment. You chose faith over fear. And so now, with the dawn rising over your healing, you ask yourself softly, not what was taken, but what's next, because this time your life belongs to peace. There comes a moment when the memory of the narcissist no longer holds power. It lingers, yes, but like a faded photograph, distant, harmless, and without the sting it once carried. You look at that image and no longer feel the ache of betrayal. You feel gratitude for what it taught you. Gratitude that you now understand what love should never look like. The healing you once begged for is now happening quietly. It doesn't arrive like a lightning strike. It comes softly in small miracles, a full night's sleep, a day without tears, a conversation that doesn't trigger pain. You catch yourself laughing again, and for a brief moment, you remember what joy used to feel like. Only this time, it's real. There's no performance, no fear of walking on eggshells. You're no longer waiting for someone's mood to decide your peace. You have become your own calm. You realize now that peace is not found in the absence of people, but in the presence of truth. John chapter 8 verse 32 says, "And you shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free." That freedom is what you carry now, not as a weapon, but as a quiet light. Your thoughts begin to shift. You stop asking, "Why did they do this to me?" and start asking, "What did this teach me about myself?" That shift is everything, because pain, when faced with faith, becomes purpose. Every tear that once fell in sorrow now waters the soil of growth. You start to see your story differently. You're not the victim anymore. You're the survivor, the learner, the one who rose. Sometimes in your solitude, you remember moments that once broke you. The night you cried until dawn. The day you realized the person you loved was a stranger. Those memories used to hurt like open wounds. Now they feel like healed scars, reminders of strength. Not suffering, you might whisper to yourself. That was the day I thought I'd never make it. And then you smile because you did. There's something holy in that realization, that God can take what was meant for harm and turn it into wisdom. You begin to sense divine timing in everything. You understand that every delay, every heartbreak, every betrayal was not meant to destroy you, but to redirect you toward a higher purpose. In your stillness, you start to pray differently. You no longer ask, "Why me?" Instead, you say, "Thank you for showing me what I could not see before." And that gratitude changes everything. You notice how the sun shines differently now. Not brighter, but warmer, because it reaches you without the shadow of manipulation. The air feels lighter because your spirit is no longer burdened by someone else's lies. You're finally breathing your own truth. You spend time alone, not out of loneliness, but peace. You walk, think, and sometimes cry, But those tears are no longer bitter. They're cleansing. You might sit by the window and whisper, "I made it." And somewhere deep within, you feel heaven whisper back, "Yes, you did." Then comes a gentle conviction, not of guilt, but of purpose. You begin to realize that healing is not just about surviving what happened to you. It's about transforming it, using it, becoming someone new because of it. You start to notice others who are still trapped in cycles of pain. You recognize their silence, their forced smiles, their weary hearts, because you've been there. And your compassion deepens. You no longer carry bitterness. You carry empathy. Romans chapter 8 verse 28 says, "And we know that all things work together for good to them that love God." You see now how even the darkness had meaning, how it prepared you for light. Your story becomes a quiet testimony. You don't need to tell it loudly. You live it. In your calmness, in your boundaries, in your peace. And as you sit there, feeling the soft weight of your own resilience, one truth becomes clear. The narcissist's chapter in your life has ended, but your story has only just begun. One day, you wake up and realize that forgiveness is no longer something you are trying to force. It has become something you quietly understand. You don't forgive because they apologized. They never truly did. You forgive because holding on was only keeping you in the same prison they once built. Forgiveness doesn't mean pretending it didn't happen. It doesn't mean excusing their cruelty or rewriting history. It means finally releasing yourself from their grip. You see, bitterness is like a chain that binds you to the one who hurt you. And the key to breaking it lies in surrender, not to them, but to peace. Ephesians chapter 4 verse 31 says, "Let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and evil speaking be put away from you, with all malice." You read those words, and they don't sound like weakness. They sound like freedom. You no longer need revenge. You don't need to prove your worth to anyone who refused to see it. Their blindness was never your burden to fix. You now understand that true justice doesn't come from your hands, it comes from divine order. And in that realization, a strange calm begins to settle in your heart. You start noticing small things again. The sound of birds in the morning, the way light moves across your wall. These little things feel sacred now, like gentle reminders that life continues, and it's beautiful without them. You had forgotten how it felt to simply exist without fear, to move through your day without constantly measuring someone's mood. It is here, in this quiet season of your life, that grace finds you. Not as a thunderclap, but as a whisper. Grace doesn't erase what happened. It simply covers it with understanding. You begin to see how everything, even the pain, was part of a divine classroom. Every betrayal was a teacher. Every heartbreak was a lesson in strength. Sometimes you still think about the narcissist. But when you do, there's no rush of anger or sadness, only distance. You can look back and say, that was then. You've grown beyond it. The person you were when you met them no longer exists. You've evolved. You remember those sleepless nights when you asked God to take the pain away, and now you realize He didn't remove it, He transformed it. That pain became a compass, pointing you toward healing. There's beauty in this transformation, in how something so dark could lead you to something so pure. You start to see how love is supposed to feel. Not like confusion, not like fear, but like quiet security. Love doesn't ask you to lose yourself. It helps you find yourself again. You start caring for yourself in ways you never did before. You eat better, sleep deeper, breathe slower. You learn to rest without guilt, to say no without apology, to exist without explanation. These small acts of care are not selfish. They're sacred. Every now and then, you might hear that the narcissist is still living the same pattern, new targets, same lies. And instead of anger, you feel pity. Because you see now that their punishment is not your responsibility. Their curse is their own emptiness. You whisper a prayer, not for them to return, but for them to one day face the truth. And then you let that prayer go. Because the story no longer belongs to you. Isaiah chapter 61 verse 3 says that God gives beauty for ashes, the oil of joy for mourning, the garment of praise for the spirit of heaviness. You have lived those words. The ashes became soil. The mourning became movement. The heaviness became wisdom. And as you stand in the stillness of your new beginning, you understand you didn't just survive what happened. You were reborn through it. The narcissist never imagined that their cruelty would become the soil of your strength. But it did. And that, perhaps, is the quietest and most poetic justice of all. Have you ever noticed how silence becomes your greatest weapon after walking away from a narcissist? Not the cold silence of revenge, but the peaceful kind, the kind that says, I'm no longer giving you access to my soul. At first, that silence feels strange. For so long, your world revolved around noise, constant tension, endless explanations, defending yourself for things you never did. But now, in the quiet, you start to hear something else, your own thoughts again. You remember what it feels like to breathe without fear, to make small choices, what to eat, what to wear, what to watch, without the weight of someone's disapproval pressing down on you. And in those small freedoms, you rediscover the person who was buried beneath years of manipulation. It is here that the Holy Spirit begins to work deeply. Psalm chapter 46 verse 10 says, Be still and know that I am God. In that stillness, you begin to see that God was never silent. He was waiting for the noise to stop so you could finally hear His whisper again. The narcissist's world runs on chaos. Noise is their disguise. They thrive on confusion because confusion keeps you controlled. But once you step out of that fog, you begin to see how every word they used was designed to keep you small. Every compliment had strings attached. Every argument was a trap. Now, your silence is not weakness. It's clarity. You've stopped explaining yourself to people who never wanted to understand. You've stopped defending your goodness to those who thrived on misunderstanding you. This silence has power. It is the sound of boundaries being rebuilt brick by brick. It is the sound of healing happening inside your heart, slowly, quietly, faithfully. There are moments when loneliness creeps in. You wonder if the silence means emptiness. But it doesn't. This quiet is not empty. It's sacred space. It's where your soul finally has room to grow again. You start talking to God in that silence. Not in loud prayers, but in gentle conversations throughout the day. You speak less, but listen more. And you realize that peace has its own language, and that language is trust. Sometimes, the narcissist will try to pull you back. A text, a message, a subtle guilt trip disguised as kindness. They cannot understand why their manipulation no longer works. They sense that the energy that once fueled them is gone. You've stopped feeding the fire, and so their chaos begins to consume itself. You don't respond. Not out of hatred, but out of wisdom. Because responding means reopening a door that God already closed. Silence in this moment is obedience. It's faith in action. You realize that the narcissist doesn't deserve access to your peace. Your silence becomes your declaration, a holy boundary that says, "You no longer have authority over my emotions." In the quiet, healing begins to show itself in unexpected ways. Your laughter sounds different now, fuller, freer. You no longer flinch when the phone rings. You no longer second-guess every word that comes out of your mouth. You simply exist peacefully, purposefully, and as you look back, you see how much noise you once lived in. How the narcissist's chaos used to fill every corner of your life. But now, the silence feels like a song, a hymn of restoration that you walk through your days, knowing that this peace didn't come cheaply. It was earned through tears, prayer, and surrender. It is the quiet aftermath of a storm that tried to destroy you. The narcissist will never understand that your silence isn't about them. It's about you choosing peace over pain, wisdom over reaction, healing over history. And when you wake in the morning and hear nothing but the stillness of your home, you smile. Because that silence means one thing: you are free. There comes a moment when you look in the mirror and realize you are no longer the same person who once begged to be understood. The reflection staring back at you carries strength, not the loud kind, but the quiet, enduring strength of someone who has walked through fire and come out gold. You used to flinch at your own reflection, haunted by the words the narcissist planted in your mind. "You're not enough," they said. "You're too sensitive, too emotional, too much." But now those words echo like old, forgotten whispers. They no longer define you. Healing has changed your posture. You stand taller, speak slower, breathe deeper. There is no need to defend yourself anymore. Truth has already defended you. Isaiah chapter 43 verse 2 says, "When you pass through the waters, I will be with you. And through the rivers, they shall not overflow you." Those words feel personal now, because you remember the flood, the storm of manipulation, confusion, and fear, and how it tried to pull you under. But somehow, you didn't drown. You rose. This transformation didn't happen overnight. Healing is not a straight road. It's a winding path filled with pauses and relapses. There were days when you thought you were free, only to wake up with memories that burned again. There were nights when forgiveness felt impossible, but each time you stumbled, grace caught you. You learned that falling back into old pain doesn't mean you failed. It simply means the heart needs more time. Healing doesn't rush, it unfolds. You began to speak kindly to yourself, something the narcissist never did. You started replacing their lies with truth. When the voice in your head said, "You're unlovable," you whispered back, "I was created with love." When it said, "You'll never be enough," you responded, "I am fearfully and wonderfully made," just as Psalm chapter 139 verse 14 declares. Slowly, your mind began to believe it. Your thoughts became prayers. Your silence became worship. You stopped searching for closure from the narcissist. Because closure doesn't come from the person who broke you. It comes from the one who healed you. You understood that peace is not found in explanations, But in release. You started surrounding yourself with gentleness, soft music, honest people, quiet mornings. You found peace not in grand achievements, but in simple things, making tea, watching the sunrise, reading scripture without interruption. It's not that life became perfect. There are still triggers, still echoes of the past. But now, those echoes don't control you. They remind you how far you've come. When you remember their face, you no longer feel anger. You feel distance, a holy distance that protects your peace. The past feels like another lifetime, and maybe it is. The person who once accepted crumbs now knows they deserve a feast. And that realization changes everything. Because now you see what true love should look like: patient, honest, kind, and without fear. The kind of love described in 1 Corinthians chapter 13 verse 4. Love is patient, love is kind. It does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud. You understand that what the narcissist offered wasn't love. It was control dressed as affection. It was hunger disguised as attention. It was a shadow pretending to be light. But now you stand in real light. The kind that doesn't need to be proven, the kind that exists quietly, faithfully, and endlessly within your soul. You are no longer the wounded one. You are the one who survived, who learned, who grew. The one who turned pain into wisdom and fear into faith. And that strength, that quiet, spiritual strength, is something the narcissist will never understand. Because while they remain trapped in the illusion of control, you've stepped into the reality of peace. There comes a day when the silence after the storm feels different, not empty, but full. The air no longer hums with anxiety. Your heart no longer beats with fear. Instead, there's stillness, sacred, unfamiliar stillness. That's when you realize peace isn't something that arrives. It's something that awakens. It was always there, buried beneath the noise, waiting for your surrender. The narcissist once convinced you that peace could only exist if they approved of you. They made you believe their mood controlled your worth. But peace that depends on someone else is not peace, it's captivity. True peace, the kind that Philippians chapter 4 verse 7 describes, the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, doesn't rely on circumstances or validation. It simply is. It exists even when the world feels unsteady. You began to notice this peace in small moments. When you walked outside and felt the warmth of the sun after a long night. When you opened your Bible and a verse felt like it was written just for you. When you stopped explaining your pain to people who never cared to understand it. Each moment was a quiet victory, not loud, not dramatic, but deeply holy. You started to see how God was rebuilding you differently. Not back to who you were before the narcissist, but into someone wiser, more discerning, more at peace with solitude. Because solitude used to feel like punishment, didn't it? The narcissist made sure of that. They filled your world with noise, chaos, and constant doubt. So when they left, the quiet felt unbearable. But that quiet was never punishment. It was healing in disguise. It was God whispering, now that the noise is gone, I can finally speak. And what he spoke was truth, not the twisted truth of manipulation, but the eternal kind that sets captives free. He reminded you that love was never meant to break you. It was meant to build you. That being alone is not the same as being abandoned. That being misunderstood by man does not mean you are unseen, By God, you started to understand the difference between peace and numbness. Numbness hides pain. Peace transforms it. You stopped chasing closure and started chasing clarity. You began to ask deeper questions. What did this season teach me? What wounds did it expose that needed God's touch? What part of me did He want to strengthen through this? These questions opened your eyes to something profound. The narcissist wasn't a random encounter. It was a divine classroom. Painful, yes, but purposeful. Because through that storm, you learned to depend on the one presence that never leaves. And slowly, you began to trust again, not in people, but in timing. Not in promises, but in process. You learned that the same God who allowed the breaking also orchestrated the rebuilding. You realized that what looked like rejection was really redirection. That every loss carried a lesson. Every tear carried a truth. You began to rest, not because everything was fixed, but because you finally understood that you didn't have to fix it all. Peace became your anchor. Not the kind that prevents movement, but the kind that keeps you steady as you move forward. You started smiling again, not the forced smile you wore around the narcissist to keep the peace, but a real one, born from within. And even when you thought of them, it no longer triggered pain. It triggered gratitude, because their absence gave birth to your wholeness. Now, you understand something the narcissist never will. Peace is not found in control, but in surrender. You stop chasing justice, knowing that divine justice never sleeps. You stop needing revenge, realizing that your healing is the loudest proof that evil did not win. You began walking lighter, breathing easier, and trusting more deeply, because the peace of God isn't fragile. It doesn't depend on apologies or closure. It depends on truth. And once truth sets you free, truly free, you can never return to the chains that once held you. There comes a time when you look back and realize the version of yourself that once begged, explained, and apologized no longer exists. That person was buried in the same silence the narcissist tried to shame you with. What rose instead was strength. It wasn't the kind of strength that makes you loud. It was quiet strength, soft but steady. The kind that sits calmly in the face of what once terrified you. You no longer flinch when their memory crosses your mind. You no longer replay the conversations that drained your spirit. You no longer wait for the apology that will never come. Instead, you've grown still, not out of defeat, but out of understanding. You see the truth now. The narcissist didn't destroy you. They revealed what needed healing within you. That is where your rebirth began. You started to see that their cruelty was never about you. Their manipulation, their lies, their cold indifference, all of it was a reflection of their emptiness. You were simply standing too close to their storm, and when you finally stepped away, you discovered that peace isn't the absence of people, it's the presence of discernment. You learned that boundaries are not walls, they're doors. You decide who walks through them, and those doors are no longer wide open to those who feed on your compassion. You realized that love without respect isn't love at all. It's hunger disguised as connection. And you, once starved for affection, have now feasted on the truth that it wasn't easy. Healing never is. There were nights you doubted if the pain would ever end. There were days you missed the very person who hurt you, because trauma bonds are real, and grief doesn't follow logic. but you kept walking. Even when the road was lonely. Even when your prayers felt unanswered. Even when the silence was loud. And one day, without realizing it, you woke up different. Not perfect, not fully healed, but whole enough to recognize how far you'd come. You noticed how your thoughts were kinder, how your heart beat slower, how your smile wasn't forced anymore. You started dreaming again, dreams that weren't shaped by fear or control, but by freedom. You stopped explaining your peace to people who prefer chaos. You stopped rescuing those who drown by choice. You stopped shrinking to make others comfortable. This was the moment the narcissist truly lost. Not when you blocked them, not when you stopped answering their calls, but when you stopped needing them to understand, because that's the one thing they could never stand: your indifference. Their power thrived on your reactions, your emotions, your need to fix things. But when you chose silence, the kind that comes from peace, not pain, their control dissolved. Now, you move differently. You speak slower. You love wiser. You trust deeper, not easily, but intentionally. You understand now that being too much was never your flaw. It was their limit. You've learned to see rejection as redirection. You've learned to measure love not by words, but by consistency. You've learned that forgiveness doesn't mean returning. It means releasing. Forgiveness freed your soul. It didn't excuse their actions. It simply unchained you from their shadow. And as you walk into this new season, your heart carries lessons carved by pain but refined by grace. You no longer fear endings because you've seen what beauty can grow from ruins. Every scar tells a story, not of defeat, but of divine protection. You've learned to smile at the quiet because it no longer feels empty. It feels sacred. And as you walk forward, you realize something powerful. Your story isn't about the narcissist anymore. It's about what survived after they left. The storm may have taken your peace once, but now peace is the storm you carry. When the noise fades and the night grows still, the truth becomes easier to hear. It whispers softly, almost tenderly, "You made it through. You walked through the fire, and though it burned, it did not destroy you." What the narcissist meant for your ruin became the soil for your renewal. Every tear that once fell in silence watered the seeds of your strength. Now you stand not as a victim of their cruelty, but as a living witness that light is stronger than deceit. That love, once purified by truth, does not fade. It becomes wisdom. There is a peace that follows understanding, and you have reached it. It is quiet, like the dawn after a storm. It is gentle, like the first breath after long pain. You've learned that healing is not a straight path. It bends, circles back, and sometimes pauses in the same places that once broke you. But every step, no matter how small, moves you closer to freedom. Forgiveness has been part of that journey. Not forgiveness as approval, but as release. You no longer carry the weight of proving your worth or explaining your pain. The narcissist may never see the damage they caused, and they may never change. But that is no longer your burden to bear. You understand now that their blindness is their prison. They cannot love what they cannot see, and they could not see you, not truly. But you were never invisible. Heaven saw. Grace kept record. And mercy wrote your survival into eternity's story. In quiet reflection, you may still ask, why did it happen? But the answer is no longer bitter. It is softer now. You see that even the darkness served a purpose. It taught you to value light. It made you discern what real love looks like, patient, kind, honest, and steady. You've learned that your heart, once wounded, can become a vessel for compassion. Not the kind that tolerates abuse, but the kind that sees through it and chooses peace anyway. You've come to understand the beauty of letting go. Letting go of their image, their echo, their grip on your thoughts. You no longer need closure because truth has already closed that door. What lies ahead is open space, quiet, holy, and new. There will be days when memories return, but they will no longer rule you. You'll look at them the way one looks at an old photograph, distant, gentle, and without ache. They will remind you not of loss, but of deliverance. And in those moments, you will realize something sacred. The narcissist's final victory was never real. Their pride was temporary. Their control was an illusion. What endures is your peace, your clarity, your ability to love again, wisely, freely. FEARLESLY. So as this journey closes, take a deep breath. Feel the quiet that now fills your spirit. It is the silence of release, the peace of redemption, the stillness of knowing you are safe. The narcissist may never realize that the last time they saw you was the moment they lost the best thing that ever happened to them. But that's no longer your concern. You have already stepped into your own resurrection, and as you walk into this new light, may your heart rest in the truth of Romans chapter 8 verse 28, which says, "And we know that all things work together for good to them that love the Lord, to them who are called according to His purpose." Yes, even the pain, even the heartbreak, even the part of your story that once seemed unfair, all of it has been turned into wisdom. Now, peace walks beside you. Joy returns to your mornings. Hope no longer whispers from afar. It sings quietly within your heart. You have overcome.